Good morning, everyone. At this time, I'll call the Budget Committee for Thursday, January 14th, 2021 to order. Before we get to Nick's presentation, I would like to appoint Commissioner Hogue to the committee to consider the applications for the Economic Assistance Grant Program. Commissioner Franzine has got another conflict with this, so I appreciate her stepping up at the time, but she's not able to fulfill that role, so Commissioner Hogue will take over that responsibility. With that said, I will move on to Nick and the budget presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. First on the agenda is a consideration of a budget amendment to roll the remaining project amount from the 2020 projects for the fire tower, as well as for the South Long Lake Park. There are unspent funds and work to be done out there for grass establishment, a little bit of dirt work, and other items that can't be done during the winter. And because these funds come from tax forfeited, we are not able to encumber these funds. So Land Services is requesting the opportunity to roll the remaining balance to the 2021 budget and use tax forfeited funds from 2021 to complete those projects. Any questions on that one? Discussion?
Explain that a little slower, Nick.
I'll try. For project 5802006, which is the shelter at South Long Lake Park, the original project amount was $75,000. There is $25,038 remaining unspent for that project. There is remaining dirt work and grass that needs to be established, and because of winter, we're not able to do that. So they are requesting to roll that project budget forward to use tax forfeited funds from 2021. Similarly with the project 5802009, which is the fire tower park improvements, the original budget was $168,500. There is $40,687 remaining. That still has dirt work, grass, parking lot updates to be completed. So they're requesting to move that remaining balance to the 2021 tax forfeited fund to use sales from 2021 to do those projects.
Okay, so my question is, we're not able to encumber these dollars into a new year. The statute says that we have to disperse them by the end of December. So those dollars will actually be dispersed then among the various entities out there, correct?
Correct.
So what their Land Services is asking for is the ability to look forward and assume that we'll have that much available, which we probably will, and designate that early in the year as one of the projects out of the dollars that the county receives.
Yes.
Correct?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. They do anticipate having a good year again this year in the tax forfeited sales, so they do anticipate having enough funding to pay for this. They do have a contingency that if we do not have enough sales within tax forfeit to cover this portion and still be able to settle out to the cities and townships at a similar rate to what we budgeted, that they can use other funding sources to finish this out. But they prefer to still continue funding this from tax forfeited at this point.
So why would we do this prior to those sales taking place? Why would this be brought to us at this point?
It's to establish the projects so that once they are able to get out there and begin the work, that they can start the work rather than waiting until after the tax forfeited and having the dirt work, grass work be done later in the summer. So is the intent.
They'll be using dollars that they currently have as their contingency fund and then replace those? Is that how this will work?
Correct, yep.
Any other questions from other board members?
Well, Mr. Chair, how does this affect their budget for 2021? They were probably anticipating this income for other purposes.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Brecken, they have looked at that. They feel confident that the amount of money that they'll bring in from tax forfeit sales will outpace what we have budgeted. So this will give them the opportunity to use those excess funds to finish these projects out, but as I said earlier, they do have a contingency that if sales do not meet that and we aren't able to meet the budgetary requirements there, they do have other funding sources that are non-levy based to complete these projects.
Do you support that?
I do. Our history has been pretty strong with the tax forfeited. They looked at their inventory. They feel very confident that there is a significant number of properties on there that will bring above what we have budgeted. And the other funding source is meant for work like this. So if they aren't able to take it from here, we can transition that. And Gary is on the phone if you would like to hear from him directly.
Commissioner Coring, do you have questions regarding this?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I do have a question and then a comment. I guess, is the county administrator there?
Yes.
Tim, can you explain this to me? I mean, you seem to have a way way of explaining things that it's easy for me to understand. I think I understand, but if you could just assist, that would be helpful.
You guys approved a project at both South Long Lake and up at the fire tower, and we were going to use 2020 resources to do it out of the tax forfeited fund. We were not able to finish those projects in 2020. At the end of 2020, those resources are cleared out, and we give them to cities, the county, townships. We distribute those resources. Because we didn't finish this project, those funds essentially got distributed, right? We otherwise would have spent them, but they got distributed. In 2021, it's the same amount of money we're talking about that's unspent, and so less will be distributed. So if you think about it, it's really just shifting when the distribution would occur, and it won't spend any more money than what we otherwise would have spent. It's just in a different year. And so in my mind, it is a simple shift. The only issue is, do you think we'll have adequate resources in 2021 to cover all of our expenses and this? That was my question to Gary, and he is confident based on what he knows we're going to have for parcels on the land sale and typical forestry resources that we get, that we will more than have enough money to settle out like we do every year. Does that help, Paul?
That helps tremendously. I appreciate that very much. And then I guess I've got a comment, Mr. Chairman. With all due respect to Nick. Nick, this is me. I have to have information more ahead of time. It has been your practice that I've noticed that you send things out about 10 or 15 minutes before each budget committee meeting. That is just unacceptable to me. I don't know how anybody else feels. I just got your email at 9:44 for the budget amendment. I don't know why that couldn't have been sent yesterday so I could at least look at it. And if I had any questions, I could have called the appropriate places. But this getting things at 10 or 15 minutes before, I don't appreciate it, really.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Coring, I apologize for that. That was an oversight on my part, and I will make the effort to correct that and get stuff to you in a more timely fashion.
Thank you, Commissioner Coring, and I would reiterate that. I know that I mentioned a couple meetings ago that for me, as a slow learner, I have to have that information earlier. So I like a packet, just like we get for our board meetings, a few days early so I can consider what's being requested, and so I can determine also what my questions might be to follow up with that. Commissioner Franzine?
And Mr. Chair, that's why, our budget got tabled. We didn't have a packet. We didn't have anything. It wasn't even in the county board packet. We have to have those. Otherwise, it's going to continue. I'm going to just table things because if I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm either voting no or tabling.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I understand. I'll make an effort to be better.
And as a general statement, I would say that would be true of the Personnel Committee also, not just the Finance Committee. I personally need to have a packet considering all the information that we're going to be presented with at any of these meetings so that I can consider it. So, noted. I think everybody understands what the board is asking for here. So, Gary, do you have anything you want to say about this amendment?
Just that, these projects are close to completion. I would say probably 90%, but they are still open, and we really would like to finish strong in the spring. So that's why the timing of this is where it's at. But we'd just like to finish these projects out and continue on with different ones. It was just we totally ran out of time. There was so much we were trying to get done, and most of it came down to waiting on materials. It was just such a backlog with getting materials. It really, that's why we didn't finish and spend the money, Commissioner.
So Gary, a couple of questions here, and to Nick also. So this will not impact, because we have sort of a level of disbursements to the other LGUs that we push this money out to. It's not going to change their level of participation, correct?
That is correct. The intent is not to impact the settlement portion.
So rather than talking, and I know it's sort of based on percentages that gets pushed out, but there's also a hard dollar number, and hard dollar numbers are sort of what they look at their budgets and say, okay, we think we can anticipate X versus a percentage. So my concern is that if we go ahead with this amendment and we spend this $60-some thousand or commit to it, and all of a sudden at the end of the year when we're dispersing these dollars, they get shorted on the hard dollar number. So instead of getting X, they get X minus something. Mm-hmm. And I know that our policy or the historical has been that we sort of try to keep them at a level number so they know when they do their budgets kind of what they're going to receive, and it makes it much easier for them to process their budget. That's the difference between looking at a percentage and looking at a hard number. And so are we assured, and this is to you and Gary, that they're going to get sort of that level number that they would normally expect?
Let me, if I could, Nick, let me try this one first. Commissioner Barrows, I do not believe local units of government budget for the money that we give them through apportionment. If they do, I have not received any inquiries as to the amount of timber or land that's being sold in an individual area so that they could project better in their budget what income they're going to be receiving from the TF fund. Now, that being said, our budget, if they wanted to look at that and then zero down on their city, township, or school district to find out or anticipate what they were going to get, we believe that what we budgeted, we're going to hit. And we think we can overperform the budget for the $65,000 that we gave out last year instead of, and we need to spend it this year. Hopefully that helps, but we don't have a, the county commissioners have never gave us a, you need to have X amount apportioned every year. We like to make sure that we have an apportionment, but that does fluctuate from, we're going to have over $1.5 million apportionment roughly around for this year. Some years it's 200,000. And it all, when you look at next year, if the bottom falls through on aspen prices, we can't anticipate that. We'd still cut the 2,000 acres of aspen, but if those prices drop, we all would be looking at a revenue loss or a shortfall. And so we have resource development funds and parks and trails that are there to be used for specific dedicated purposes. And that's I guess I heard contingency or option B. If for some reason we don't sell the amount of land that I think we can, we would use some of those funds. Some people call them rainy day funds, different terms for different things, but that's how we would do it and ensure that what we budgeted, we're going to make budget that we've already submitted. This is just going to add to the extra expense on that budget. I hope I'm making sense, Commissioner Barrows.
Ms. Erickson?
Mr. Chair, Gary, just one quick question. Your timber plan, is that a multi-year plan?
It is the harvest plan, we get it approved every year, but we do a 5-year projection.
So that would be the only piece, Mr. Chair, that the cities or townships potentially could be planning for, would be as if they know what the harvest plan is looking like for 2, 3, 4 years out, potentially they could hedge their bets and say, you know, we may get this, a portion of what that amount is based on X number of acres of timber in our district. Otherwise, they're going to have no idea which tracts will sell or which tracts would not sell within their own individual cities or townships. In the most cases, they're not going to be budgeting for that revenue because they have no way of knowing what that would be.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, concerns? I'd like to hear the thoughts of each of you on the amendment that's being requested. So I'll start with Commissioner Coring.
Mr. Chairman, I'm in full favor, in support of this amendment.
Commissioner Brecken.
I'm support. I'd like to see these projects completed.
Commissioner Hoag.
No concerns.
Commissioner Franzine.
I'm good with it.
Guess we'll move forward with it.
All right, we'll move forward with it.
Thank you,
on-
Gary. Thank you, Ms. Erickson, Nick, and Mr. Hool.
All right, Mr. Chair, next on is year-end budget actual estimation, analysis, and discussion. We are early in the closing process for 2020, so we are working on doing some analysis and estimation on what fund balance builds will look like. At this point, we are anticipating about a $3.6 million fund balance build for 2020. That is lower than what our last projection was. In looking at second half tax collections, due to some timing, the second half settlement was actually a smaller percentage of what we had collected. So that will hit us in January instead of December of 2020. It'll hit us this January. So it's not allowing us to build fund balance in 2020 as effectively, but we are going to see increased revenue in January. That is just a timing challenge for us. So we do still anticipate fund balance build in the major funds outside of highway. General fund, we still anticipate about $1.5 million in fund balance growth. A good portion of this is the CARES dollars offsetting the expenses in public safety. For highway, we anticipate about $1 million in fund balance decrease. That is due to local option sales tax, additional expenses there, and some timing of when projects were paid versus when revenues come in, which is very common for highway. Community services, we're anticipating around a $2.1 million fund balance build. That is mostly due to out-of-home placement expenses and other expenses within their area being well below what we had budgeted for 2020. So very strong performance, which helps us see that fund balance build there. And then CIP.
Quick question there, Nick, on community services. Are we seeing fewer expenses because of COVID? Has that impacted those expenses?
Mr. Chair, that might be a really good question for Kara.
Ms. Terry.
Hello, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. We have not seen a substantial decrease from COVID in relation to the assessments that we've received. We've stayed fairly steady in terms of the numbers. What I can attribute it to, though, is the really great work by our children and families area in terms of some of the programs that they have rolled out. And I believe we've shared with you at different board meetings and town meetings related to increasing foster care, focusing on adoptions, getting further upstream to avoid deeper end services, and then trying to keep kiddos in the county as opposed to sending them off outstate or out of state. So those are just a few things. I can further elaborate on those at some point if you'd like us to, not this meeting, but certainly in the future.
Thank you. I think we would like that, to be able to get some of the details on how the expenses are being controlled. So, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Terry? Commissioner Coring?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
All right, Nick?
And Mr. Chair and Commissioners, and for the final one on here is the CIP. We anticipate a little under $1 million fund balance build there. That is a direct result of freezing projects early on in this year in an effort to offset any potential COVID expenses and using that funding source. Not opening those projects back up allowed us to build fund balance in this area. We still have some growth that is necessary in all of these funds to get us up to our minimums, but this is a good step in that progression towards getting us to our minimum fund balances across the board. Any questions on fund balance itself?
No.
Okay. Budgetarily, in our major fund areas that are levy-based, we are at 112% of revenues. We collected a little over $10.8 million in extra revenue this year. Again, majority of that is the CARES dollars coming in. And conversely, we are 107.43% of budgeted expenses, with a large portion of that being attributed to the CARES expenses that were not budgeted in the beginning of the year. So across the board, we were fairly well on budget throughout the entire county. Any questions on year end? We will have a much better analysis and in-depth discussion about year end in the next month. It takes us till about January 22nd to actually close out the year and start the process of making all of our journal entries to get the true numbers for 2020. But we just want to give you a little bit of a heads up on what we're seeing so far.
Okay, so we'll look forward to that in February then.
Okay. Also, for additional business, we are in the middle of the annual audit. We did have our preliminary audit work completed last week on Tuesday and Wednesday. So far, things are progressing along very well. Auditors are getting the information they need, and we're progressing forward. They'll be back again in March to do our single audit. This is where they'll actually look into our CARES funding source to make sure that we met all statutory requirements there and all requirements set by the federal government. They'll also look at our medical assistance programs in that. It's very common for them to do, well, it's required for them to do the single audit every single year in a federal program. CARES just is lucky enough to be that one because of the situation that we're in. We feel confident that we have everything we need to appease that audit, but we'll update you when that one gets completed. Then they'll come back in May for the final audit work, and then we'll have completed financials in June. So just an update on where the audit's at. I also got notification from Tyler on the current round of grants. We have just over $3 million worth of requests. We only have the $1.2 million worth of funding, so just to prep you that there will have to be some decisions made on what we're going to do and where we're going to go with that. That state funding is restricted to that 1.2, so we're very limited on where we can go with that funding source. So that's just kind of an update. There's a little over 300 applications that he received, I think 354 if I remember correctly.
354, did you say?
Yes.
Wow. Commissioner Hoag, you haven't been in on these before, but
Get 2 pizzas.
buckle up.
There's 359. Of those, 155 are actually new applications. And then there's 204 that are repeat applications from the CARES round. So there'll be a lot of discussion, I feel, today.
It's Administrator Houle.
Mr. Chair, members, this is going to be difficult. There's 359 applications, over 3 million in requests for 1.2 million in funds. That means a lot of folks are going to have to be told no, and a lot of folks are going to have to be told we can't grant you what you've requested. You should expect you're going to get phone calls as a result of that. And these are really, really tough choices, because I do not believe that if someone appeals after your decision, I do not believe we can spend county resources on this. County government can only do that which it is statutorily authorized to do. We are not authorized to give money to businesses, except when we're given resources to do that specific thing. And so when you award that 1.2 and it's gone, it's gone. And so I'm just saying, you're right, buckle your seatbelt, because I do believe you're going to need to be prepared to get those calls. I know I'm going to. I think you will too.
It's an uncomfortable position because you really feel like you're picking winners and losers, and that's not fun, particularly in this environment where there is a great need by all these businesses to try to recapture some of these expenses and to be able to survive. And I understand the sensitivity of that and their passion for their businesses. So I think that we will do the best we can, and 1.2 is the number that we have to work with. And we'll, within those parameters, I think that we will have to make some tough decisions. So we'll be having that meeting right after, well, at 11 o'clock, correct? We'll be sitting down and going through the list and making some decisions. So not comfortable, but necessary. Anything else, Nick?
With that, Mr. Chair, that's all I have for today.
Any additional concerns, questions from any of the board members? Commissioner Coring?
Mr. Chairman, no further questions or concerns from me. I appreciate it, you asking. Thanks.
You're welcome. Anyone up here? Nope.
Nope.
Thank you, Nick, for the presentation. We'll look forward to February. Thank you, Ms. Erickson and Mr. Houle, for your explanations, and Gary and Kara for assisting us to understand some of these issues. So thank you very much. And with that, we are done with this meeting.